The perfect picture. From the outside, my life looked perfectly balanced. I was 40 years old, a senior aerospace engineer at a firm in Houston, Texas. My wife, Laura, stayed home to take care of our 2 kids, Caleb, who had just turned 10, and Summer, our 8-year-old firecracker. People often said we were the picture of a modern American family. A steady career, a comfortable home in the suburbs, a dog named Toby, and weekends filled with soccer games and barbecues. But inside the walls of our neatly painted house, something had begun to crack. It started small, little arguments about dishes left in the sink or clothes piling up in the laundry basket. Then it grew, like rust spreading beneath a layer of paint. Laura said I never noticed how much she did at home. I said she didn't appreciate how hard I worked to keep us afloat. Every conversation turned into a tug of war. Her exhaustion against mine, her invisible labor against my visible paycheck. I used to think marriage was like a flight plan. Once set, you just followed it and arrived safely. But marriage, I learned, doesn't run on calculations or checklists. It runs on patience, empathy, and a kind of quiet attention I had long stopped giving. One Thursday evening, after another argument about forgotten chores and unpaid bills, Laura slammed her hands on the kitchen counter and said, "You think my job is easy, don't you? Why don't we switch for a week? You handle the kids, the meals, the errands, everything. Let's see how easy it is then." Her eyes were burning with frustration. I should have stopped and tried to calm her down, but pride is a dangerous thing. "Fine," I said. "Let's switch. 1 week. You go back to work or whatever you want. I'll handle the house." For a moment, she looked surprised. Then she nodded almost too quickly. "Good. We'll start Monday." That weekend felt strange, like the calm before a storm. I watched her go about her usual routine, packing lunches, folding laundry, answering Caleb's endless questions, helping Summer braid her hair. It looked manageable. Tedious, maybe, but nothing I couldn't handle. I'd built engines capable of crossing continents. How hard could running a household be? Monday morning arrived, and I woke up early, ready to prove my point. The sun was still hiding behind the blinds when I made breakfast. Burnt toast, overcooked eggs, and a kitchen that looked like a tornado hit it. Caleb couldn't find his sneakers. Summer spilled orange juice on her dress, and Laura, for once, just stood by the door with her coffee, watching me flounder. "Good luck," she said softly before heading out. There was something unreadable in her smile. By the time I got both kids to school, late of course, I was already sweating. The rest of the day was chaos in slow motion. The washing machine beeped nonstop. The vacuum got tangled in Summer's dolls. I tried to pay bills online, but couldn't remember any of the passwords. At lunch, I realized I hadn't eaten. At 3, I forgot to pick up the kids on time. By 5, I was ready to surrender. That night, while the kids finally fell asleep, I sat in the living room staring at the quiet mess around me. Toys scattered across the floor, half-folded laundry on the couch, dishes still in the sink. For the first time, I saw what Laura must feel every single day, a kind of exhaustion that isn't physical but emotional, constant, and unseen. I felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration. Maybe I had underestimated her. Maybe she really was holding this family together more than I ever realized. But as I shut down her laptop, where I had been trying to pay one last utility bill, a small email notification popped up in the corner of the screen. A hotel reservation in Austin, Wednesday at noon. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. But then another message appeared, an auto reply confirming the booking under Laura's name. I frowned, clicked it open, and read the details twice. Same date, same hotel, every Wednesday for the past month. My chest tightened. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself there was a reasonable explanation. But before I could close the laptop, another notification flashed on the screen, a text message that made my stomach drop. "You drive me crazy. Can't wait for next week." That night, I didn't sleep at all.
The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. The sunlight pouring through the blinds felt too bright, too harsh. Laura was already gone when I came downstairs, her coffee mug half empty on the counter, a faint trace of her perfume still hanging in the air. It was strange how something so familiar could suddenly feel foreign. I went through the motions, made breakfast, packed the kids' lunches, pretended everything was normal. But inside, every second felt like a lie stretching thinner and thinner. At work, I'd spent years learning how to read mechanical patterns, vibrations, signals, small inconsistencies that warned you something was about to fail. And now I was seeing those same signs in my marriage. The unexplained errands. The way she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The new clothes she said she bought on sale. All the little details I'd ignored before started to fit together like the pieces of a blueprint I didn't want to understand. That evening when she came home, she seemed lighter, humming as she stirred dinner, laughing at something Summer said. I watched her, trying to find the guilt, the tension, anything that gave her away. But Laura looked perfectly calm, almost radiant. It was infuriating and at the same time heartbreaking. After the kids went to bed, I tried to bring it up, casually, almost carelessly. So, how was your day? I asked, leaning against the counter. She smiled without looking at me. Busy. A lot of errands. I went by the post office, then stopped at the library. The library in Austin? I asked before I could stop myself. Her hand froze for a split second before she turned around, eyebrows raised. Austin? No. Why would I go there? I shrugged, forcing a smile. Just curious. She stared at me for a moment too long, then went back to rinsing the dishes. The silence stretched between us like a live wire. I wanted to confront her right there, demand the truth, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. That night, after she fell asleep, I slipped downstairs and opened her laptop again. I scrolled through the emails, checking the timestamps, the sender. Everything matched. Weekly reservations all confirmed. I clicked open the latest one. The hotel's name was Riverside Inn, a small place in Austin about 2 hours from Houston. Check-in, Wednesday 12:30 p.m. Same time every week. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to believe there was some innocent reason behind it. A meeting, a retreat, anything. But then I found the photos, hidden in a folder buried inside her email drafts. Selfies. Smiling. Wine glasses. A man's arm in the corner of one picture. I knew that arm. That watch. That leather bracelet. Derek Lang. My boss. The man I'd worked with for nearly a decade. The man I'd trusted. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the laptop. The next morning, Laura acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out, told me she'd be running a few errands. I watched her drive away and stood by the window long after her car disappeared down the street. By noon I'd made up my mind. I called our neighbor, Mrs. Green, and asked if she could watch the kids for the afternoon. Then I grabbed my keys, my phone, and my camera and got into the car. The drive to Austin felt like sleepwalking, every mile blending into the next, my thoughts looping between disbelief and rage. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Inn, my pulse was steady. Too steady. Like a man about to defuse a bomb he already knew was going to explode. There it was, Laura's car, parked right outside room 14. For a moment I just sat there, watching the curtain sway gently from the air conditioning inside. Then I stepped out, walked across the lot, and knocked on the door. The sound of her voice froze me. Just a second, she said, light and careless, as if I were nobody. When the door opened, her smile collapsed. Her face went pale. And behind her, standing barefoot, shirt unbuttoned halfway down, was Derek. My breath caught in my throat. Every sound seemed to fade away. The hum of the highway. The chirping birds. Even the pounding in my chest. No words came out. I just stared at them both, her eyes wide with guilt, his frozen with fear. Then I raised my phone, took 3 slow photos, and turned away. Max, wait, she cried, but her voice sounded distant, like it came from underwater. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. As I got into my car, my hands trembled on the steering wheel, but my decision was clear. The drive home was quiet, endless, and hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the road ahead, thinking about the house, the kids, the life we'd built, and how in a single afternoon, it had all come undone. When I got home that evening, the sky was already dark. The kids were at Mrs. Green's, and the house was silent, heavy with the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. I walked straight to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out one of Laura's suitcases. Every motion felt mechanical, detached. Fold. Sip. Stack. Repeat. By the time I finished, the suitcase sat by the front door like an unspoken verdict. I sat on the couch, the quiet buzzing in my ears louder than any sound, and waited for her to come home. At 9:30, I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. A few seconds later, the door opened. She stepped inside, her voice light, almost rehearsed. Hey, you're still up? I didn't answer. She froze when she saw the suitcase. "What's this?" she asked, her tone breaking slightly. "You should know," I said. My voice sounded strange, calm but distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Her lips trembled. "Max, please, let me explain." I stood up. "Explain what? The hotel? The emails? Derek." Tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was lonely, Max. You were always gone, always tired. I didn't even know how to talk to you anymore." I let out a hollow laugh. "So you talked to him instead?" She stepped closer, reaching out a hand. "Please, I'm sorry. I just needed to feel seen again. I never meant to hurt you." I stepped back. "You didn't just hurt me, Laura. You broke everything." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us was thick with all the words we'd never said, all the moments we'd ignored. I thought of Caleb's laugh, Summer's drawings taped on the fridge, the house we built together one argument at a time. And I realized something cruel: our marriage hadn't died in that hotel room. It had been dying slowly, silently for years. The affair was just the final nail. She tried to speak again, but I couldn't listen. I walked past her, opened the front door, and pointed to the suitcase. "You can stay somewhere else tonight." She started crying, quiet at first, then louder. I didn't move. After a moment, she picked up the suitcase, hesitated, and whispered, "You'll regret this." "No," I said softly. "You will." When the door closed, I stood there for a long time. The house felt emptier than it ever had. I turned off the lights and went upstairs, past the kids' rooms, past our wedding photo on the wall. Her smile in that picture used to mean everything. Now it felt like a ghost staring back at me. The next morning I called my lawyer. I told him everything, about the affair, the proof, the photos. He didn't say much, just told me to bring the evidence. By noon, the papers were ready. Petition for divorce on grounds of adultery. When I hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at my reflection in the computer screen. I didn't look like myself anymore. My eyes were tired, my face drawn. But there was a strange calm beneath the pain, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I spent the next few days gathering documents, bank statements, everything the lawyer needed. I sent the photos and screenshots to HR, marked confidential. Derek had violated company policy by engaging in a personal relationship with a subordinate spouse. I didn't want revenge, but I did want justice. 2 days later, HR called. Derek had been suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, he was terminated. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, just closure. A door closing quietly on something rotten. When Laura came by to see the kids that weekend, she didn't look like the woman I used to know. Her hair was pulled back messily, her eyes red. She tried to talk to me, but I couldn't. Not yet. I let her see Caleb and Summer, watched from a distance as she hugged them tightly, whispering apologies they couldn't yet understand. After she left, Summer asked, "Daddy, why is Mommy crying so much?" I knelt beside her and said the only thing I could, "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. But we'll be okay." That night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat outside on the porch. The crickets hummed in the dark, and the Texas air was heavy with humidity. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to cry, not out of anger but out of grief. Not just for the marriage I lost, but for the man I used to be before I learned what betrayal really felt like. Weeks passed, though time no longer felt linear. Each day bled into the next. Work, school runs, half-eaten dinners, court paperwork, silence. The house echoed differently now. Caleb asked fewer questions. Summer drew pictures of a family with 3 stick figures instead of 4. Sometimes she'd color the 4th one standing far away, under a gray cloud. I'd look at those drawings and feel something twist deep inside me. Laura moved into a small apartment in Dallas. I knew because her lawyer had to send over the updated address for the custody agreement. She wanted shared custody, but the court leaned in my favor. Her affair, the photos, the timeline, it all painted a picture too clear to deny. The judge granted me primary custody. She'd see the kids on weekends, supervise for the first 3 months. When I told her, she just nodded. "I deserve that," she whispered. Maybe she did. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. At work, word about Derek spread faster than wildfire. The day HR escorted him out of the building, people stopped what they were doing and stared. Some whispered. Some pretended not to see. I stayed in my office with the blinds closed. That same afternoon, my supervisor called me in. They offered me Derek's position, lead project manager. A raise, a corner office, and more responsibility than I had ever wanted. I accepted. Not because I was proud, but because I needed something solid to stand on. Something that still made sense. The first few months were brutal. Between raising 2 kids and handling a new leadership role, I barely had time to think. But maybe that was a blessing. Grief needs space to grow, and I wasn't giving it any. I buried it beneath schedules, meetings, and bedtime stories. Still, there were nights when the house felt too quiet. Nights when I'd find myself staring at the empty side of the bed, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, and remembering the small, ordinary things. Her laughter when Summer made a joke, the way she'd hum along to the radio while cooking, the smell of her shampoo. Love doesn't vanish instantly. It fades like sunlight at dusk, leaving only the outlines of what used to be. One Saturday evening, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, she came to pick up the kids. Her eyes were swollen but steady. The kids ran to her, hugging her legs. I stood by the door watching silently. When she looked at me, there was no anger left, just something that resembled regret. "I heard about your promotion," she said quietly. "You deserve it." "Thanks," I replied. She hesitated, glancing at the kids playing near the car. "You're a good father, Max. Better than I was a wife." I didn't know what to say to that. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It arrives in its own time, or never. I nodded, and she smiled weakly before turning away. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch again. The Texas sky was wide and full of stars. The kids were asleep, Toby curled at my feet. I thought about everything we'd lost, trust, love, time, and everything we still had. I wasn't sure if healing ever really finished. Maybe it just becomes quieter, less sharp. The next morning, I took Caleb and Summer to the park. They raced each other down the path, their laughter echoing through the trees. For the first time in a long while, I smiled, genuinely. There was peace in the smallness of the moment, in the simple act of being there. But that peace was fragile. That evening, when I checked my phone, there was a message from Laura. "I'm sorry for everything. Truly. I hope one day you can remember the good parts too." I stared at the screen for a long time, then deleted the message. Not out of hatred, just finality. Some doors don't need to be reopened. In the weeks that followed, the kids adjusted. The nightmare stopped. The laughter returned. The house began to feel like a home again. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the real beginning of something new. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a quieter, truer version of life. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. 6 months later, the air in Houston felt different. Lighter somehow, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. The kids had settled into a rhythm, their laughter once again filling the spaces that used to echo with silence. I woke up earlier these days not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The mornings had become my quiet ritual, coffee, sunlight spilling across the kitchen counter, and a few moments just to breathe. I'd learned to cook breakfast without burning the toast, to braid Summer's hair before school, and to remember which soccer cleats Caleb liked best. Small things, ordinary things, but they mattered. They were the kind of details that build a life, one gentle repetition at a time. At work, I had grown into my new role. Leading the aerospace project team felt different now. Before, I worked for recognition, for titles, for progress. Now, I work for something simpler: stability, honesty, peace. I no longer chased perfection. I just wanted to do good work and come home to my kids. It was strange how clarity can arrive from chaos, like the calm that follows turbulence when the plane finally steadies itself. One afternoon, as I drove home from the office, I passed by a little diner on the corner of Willow and 9th. Through the window, I saw Laura sitting alone, stirring her coffee. She looked smaller somehow, her hair shorter, her expression distant. For a brief second, our eyes met through the glass. Neither of us waved. Neither of us smiled. We just looked at each other, two people who had loved, lost, and learned the hardest way possible. Then the light turned green and I drove on. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in the living room scrolling through old photos. There was one of us at Galveston Beach, long before everything fell apart. Caleb was only 4, sitting on my shoulders, and Laura had her arms wrapped around my waist. We looked happy, honestly happy. I didn't delete it. I couldn't. It wasn't a lie, it was just a memory from a time when love hadn't yet become complicated. I realized then that I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't forgive everything, but the anger had lost its shape. What remained was something quieter, acceptance, maybe even gratitude. Because without the pain, I would never have changed. Without the betrayal, I might never have seen how fragile trust really is, or how strong I could be when forced to stand alone. Weeks turned into months. The divorce paperwork faded from the table, replaced by drawings, school notes, and weekend plans. Caleb started piano lessons. Summer joined a dance class. Life kept moving, not as a clean slate, but as a page rewritten with purpose. One evening, while watching the sunset from the backyard, Caleb climbed onto my lap and said, "Dad, are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at him, then at the sky glowing orange and gold. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think I am." He smiled and leaned his head against my chest. "Mom said she hopes you are too." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and wrapped my arm around him. The world felt simple again, like a plane finding its right altitude after a long storm. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stood by the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. For months, I had lived in the shadow of betrayal, anger, and grief. But now, standing there, I realized something. Pain had not destroyed me, it had refined me. It stripped away everything false, everything fragile, until only the truth remained. The truth that I could still love my children fully. The truth that I could rebuild from ashes. The truth that life, no matter how broken, always finds a way to move forward. And as I turned off the lights and whispered a quiet goodnight to the empty room beside mine, I finally understood what it meant to let go, not to forget, but to make peace with what's gone. Sometimes I thought God lets us shatter first, so we can finally see what we're truly made of.